In this video, I'll demonstrate score homework number 2, exercise 3. So I'll start inputting the notes on staff 1. So I'm using a size of 0.75, so it's 75% of the default size, so it'll fit the music a little better. Now press space. We have M2, and then BA, E natural 3, G sharp, D4. So I'm going to use the X operator to multiply the chords to copy them. So I'm going to type X3. So on repetition 2 and 3, the accidentals will not be given. If you ever want the accidentals to be preserved, you'd use Z instead of X. So this would keep the E natural and the G sharp for all three. But in this case, I don't want it, so I'll just do X3. And then we have a measure, E3, A, D4. And then we have E3, B, D4. And then twice. So notice that when you use repetition operator, you have to be careful because D4 is followed by E3 when it does the multiplication or the repetition. And so if you didn't put E3, it would keep the octave of the D4 at the end of the chord because it's just inserting that text twice when it processes it. So it's a good idea for chords at least to put the octave number on the first note if you're going to use the multiplier. So now we have a measure, A2, A3, colon D4, F, and times 2 in measure line. And I'm going to press enter just so it doesn't overlap or overflow. And then continue on with the next measure, which is A3, C4, F, times 2, and then A flat 3, colon, C4, F. And then a measure line, G3, C4, F, A, G3, B, F4, times 2. And then the last measure, G3, B, E4 times 3, and the final bar line. So press enter to see the music. So it looks pretty good. So I'm going to enter the 18 rhythms. So there's 18 quarter notes, so it's pretty easy. So it's quarter note times 18 and semicolon. So there are no marks, beams, or slurs, so you can type G to just end the entry mode at this point for this line. And then I won't save the text I just typed and then go to staff 2. Press space bar. So the notes stage is treble clef, E5, and then I'll go into proximity mode for the B, and now the next measure, C, G sharp, G, B times 5, C, B, A, B, C, E, D, A, C, B, C. So now I'm at the beginning of the small notes in the measure 5. So these are called Q-sized notes. So you type Q plus to turn on Q-sizeness, and then type in the notes. So D, E, D, C sharp, D, B up, F, A, and then E, G, D, C, A, J, G, D, U. And now we're finished with the Q size notes, so you type Q minus, and then type in the last note, which is an E. And so when I put in the Q size notes, I'll just demonstrate it, is they'll go stem up. So we can either put SD for stems down before we start entering the Q notes, or I'll just demonstrate how to do what's called like a mass edit. in score, to flip all of those down. So I'll show you how to like fix errors that are a little bit larger in the input than just a single note. So press enter. So now we have the rhythms. So it's 16th, so S, E dot, H for the first measure, S, E dot, and then Q double dot, and S for the second measure. So now we have some triplet 16ths, so 6 of them. So triplet 16th is either a 24 rhythm or TS for triplet 16th, and I have 6 of them. And then we have 6 triplet 8ths. So similarly for triplet 6/8ths, we can type TE or 12. So 12 because there's 12 triplet 16th in a whole note. So there's 3 1/4 and 4 quarters in a whole note. So 3 times 4 is 12. So now we get to the grace note, and that's represented as a G as a rhythm. And then we have half note C, and then 2/8 notes. So now we get to the 15 Q size notes. So they represent 3 quarters, and there's 15 of them, so that means there's 5 of these in each quarter note. And there's 4 quarter notes in a whole note, so that's going to be 5 times 4. And so that's a 20 is the rhythm. So I put 20, and there's 15 of them, so times 5. And then the last note is the dotted half. And that ends the rhythms. And so there was an error because I typed 34 rhythms. So somehow the triplet 8th was, I skipped over that. So I can't use overmode in this emulator, so I'll just go back and type TE times 6 and G H EX2 20 times 15 half dot. So now I'll add the marks. So there is one mark in this example. So that is on the last note, which is an accent. So an accent is an A, and then the note number for the accent. So that is 39 and semicolon. So now we'll type the beams. There's no regular beam duration that we can use automatic beaming for in this case because of the 15 grace notes, which take up a dotted half note. All the other beams are quarter notes, so other than the group of 15, we could use 2B, but we can't in this case because of the the 15 notes. So I will put in the numbers individually. And you'll see another reason why we'd maybe do them individually in this case. So we have 1 to 2, 4 to 5, and now we have 8 to 13. So this beam has a 6 on it, so you can actually type 608 space 13. So the 6 is indicating what number to put on the beam, and then we have a placeholder 0 for just to go with the 8. So the way this works is the last 2 digits are the note number, and then the digits to the left of that is the number to put on the beam. So I can't say 68 because it'll probably think note 8 or note 68. So I have to put a 0 to say this is a 6 put on the beam that starts on note 8 and continues to 13. So you can always add this later in input mode. So I'll do that for the group of 15 to show you how that works. So it's optional to put the numbers on now. I would just do it later because it's easier to keep track of things. So in here I have to keep track of more numbers and it gets a little confusing. So, but I'll do the triplet here. So it starts on note 14. So it's 3, 1, 4 to 16. And then we have 3, 1, 7 to 19. So I'm putting 3s on those 2 beams. And then we have 22 to 23 and 24 to 38 for the last beam. And for the last beam, I could put 1524 to 38, but I'll just demonstrate it how to add that number later. So we go 24 to 38 for the last beam and a semicolon. And now the slurs, so it's fairly similar. So it's 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 7 to 21. And then there's also 20 to 21, but I want the slur for the grace note to the regular note to go underneath. So I'll put minus. And then we have 22 to 39. And I'll also just force it up in case score decides otherwise. Now press semicolon and enter. So there's all of the slurs and the beams added. So I'm not going to save this. And then I'm going to exit out of input mode since we finished the input stage. So the first thing you should always do is save it. And I will save it to like EXER3. And now I'll do LJ. And LJ will check to make sure the durations of each staff are equal. Otherwise, there's a problem. You have to go back and fix it. So LJ, 1, 2, enter. And then enter again. And now it's aligned. So the first thing I'll do is fix the cue size notes. So I left them so there would be stem up. So we can do that by clicking on group in the bottom menu. So I'll go down here to the bottom. And then I want to flip them down. So I click on the FLD, or you can type FLD. And now I want to click here to draw the box. It's easier to do it graphically. So I click on that, and then I draw a box around the cue size notes. And then I click on box OK. So now the stems of everything are down for that group. So I will type SM to save the current state. I will put the curly brace at the beginning, so I'll say ST114, enter. So I'm editing the bar line right here. And I want to change the style from probably 0 to 8. So I say 5 space 8. And then you have to remember to copy it by pressing function key 3 or clicking on the 3 button at the bottom. And then I can press escape. So here's the curly brace. So next thing I will do is maybe adjust the beam for the group of 15. So I'll click on it and type Z4 just so I can see it better. So it's slightly outside of the viewing range for the end. So you can't use left and right arrows in any way that I know of. So you have to press escape, go back temporarily, and push the left arrow to see all of them, and then type I enter to go back to editing the beam. So the first thing with the beam is we can add the number. So if you press F1, you get a list of the parameters. It'll be parameter 8, which is number over beams. And that should be fairly explanatory. So I type 8 space 15, and I get the 15 added to the beam. And I can click on escape to just save it and see what's happened. So I can type I and go back to the beam. So we have 2 lines on the beam, so 2 beamlets. So we can go back to F1 to see which parameter is for the beamlets. So if you look at parameter 7, it says stem direction and number of beams. So if you're familiar with score, you might already know what to do, but if you're not, you can go and look at parameter 7. So parameter 7 is always a 2-digit number. The left digit, which is the 10-digit, indicates the stem direction. So we want to keep the stem directions, and we want to change the other number, which is the 1's digit. So a 1 means stem up, and 2 means stem down. So Oh, no, so we want to, the number is, okay, yeah, so, yeah, so this is, yeah, so yeah, it looks a little confusing, but it's the ones digit which tells you how many beams. So we want to have one beam. So the ones digit has to be changed from 2 to 1. So I'll press escape to go back to editing the beam. So if you look at the top, parameter 7 is set to 22, so you want to change it to 21. So the 20 is stems down, and the 1 is for one beam on the, one kind of line on the beam. So I type 721, enter. So you won't see anything change because it's showing the old two beam version, and it's actually one beam, but you can't see that until you escape from beams to save that change. So now you can see there's one beam. So now we can adjust it vertically. So I'm going to press F4, or you can click on the 4 button at the bottom, and that will move the left end only. So I will just move it up with my mouse until it gets where I want it to go. And I'll actually move a little higher than the example. And then I'll press function F5 for the right side. So, and I'll just do it by on where I'd like to have it. So I'll put it there. Maybe one more. And then I can press escape to stop moving the right end. And then press escape to stop editing the beam. So if you notice, the stems didn't follow the beam. So there's a command you run to move the stems back onto the beams after you've been editing beams or stems. So that's the AD command, and then you give the staff number to fix. So it'll be staff 2. So now I press enter, and you'll see the stem lengths are all corrected for that new angle to the beam. So now I'll zoom out again. So say the first 5 slurs look okay, but the second one needs some improvement. So I'll click on it. So the lower left corner, and then type Z2 to zoom in a little bit. Press escape and use the left arrow key to get the full slur on the view. Type I enter to go back to the slur. So let's see. So slurs are very kind of freeform on what you can do. So there's lots of options we could do. I'll adjust the curvature, which is currently 2.674. So I'll move it up a little bit to help get it away from the grace note. And so I'll set it to a curvature of 3. So that means the top of the curvature is 3 diatonic steps from the endpoints. So now it's up a little bit. I'll press escape to see the full one. So I can also kind of increase the flatness with parameter 9. So I can maybe put it to 1. And that'll make the endpoints a little bit steeper and then flatten the top. So that kind of gets it out of the way of the grace note a little bit more. I'll press escape so you can see. Still not so great. So I can also adjust the center point of the slur, which is parameter 10. So I'll say 10 and then 0.6 to make it 60% of the way instead of 50%. And then, so it's getting better. It's still pretty close to the top of the grace note. So I'll do some refinements on the end point of the slur. So I'll type I to go back, and then I'll press F5 to edit just the right edge end. I'll type INC at 0.25 to use smaller motion with the arrow keys. And then I will move it up and right around just to adjust it a little bit to give more space above the grace note. So that's looking pretty good. So for the grace note slur, it doesn't look too bad, but I maybe want to decrease the curvature because ideally you don't want the top, or in this case the bottom of the slur, to be tangent with the staff line if you can avoid it. So I'm going to decrease the parameter 7 to maybe 0.75 or minus 0.75 for negative curvature. And then I will move it up a quarter unit just to get it a little way from the bottom staff line. So now it's fully in the space, and so that'll be a clearer view of the slur. So it makes it easier for the performers to see the slur. If the endpoints are not touching the staff line and the top of the curve or the bottom is not tangent or touching the staff lines. So now we can go look at the last one. So you can see it's colliding with the B in the tuplet group. So I will increase the curvature. So in this case, I'm going to use visual editing of parameter 7 instead of typing a bunch of numbers to see which one is best. So to do that on a Mac, you type option 7. And so now if you look on the right, there's a highlighted yellow text which says parameter 7 with an increment of 0.25. So that means every time I press the up arrow, it'll add 0.25 to the current value of parameter 7, which is now 3.219. Or I can press the down arrow to subtract 0.25 from that number. So I'll press it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and yeah, maybe 6, no, probably 5. And then I'll press escape to stop editing parameter 7. And I'll press escape so we can see the new position of the slur. So that's pretty good. I can also make the center of the slur a little bit before 50% because kind of center it on the B. So I can say parameter 10, set it to 0.4 so that the center is 40% of the way through the slur instead of 50%. So I can get it closer to the B, which is the highest point in the tuplet group. So you can see it moved a little bit, so it pushed down on the right side and it pushed it up a little on the left side. Now press escape so you can see the final result. So that makes it a little bit nicer because it's more symmetric around the B instead of the A. And I'd say that looks like that's the end of the example. And of course, you should have been typing SM a lot and when you're editing this so you can recover your previous contents before you make a mistake.